It's weekend. Anything interesting? Any parties like Halloween something this weekend? No? Maybe? That's not for us, huh? Okay. All right, well, I posted this thing under week 5. I figured we'll go over it today. And I also posted this. So during week 6, so this is the end of week 4, and then so we have week 5, and then we got week 6. So during week 6, I want to meet with every group, and I want to meet for about 20 minutes. Okay, and during that 20 minutes, you're going to tell me what data you have selected and what you plan on doing with it, and you know why you selected it, and what's going to happen. Okay, and the meeting will be graded. All right, it's going to be worth a portion of your final project grade. Okay, now if you do terrible at this meeting, we're going to have to schedule a follow-up meeting. Okay. But the initial grade from your initial bad meeting will stand, okay? But I won't allow you to go on with your project if you like totally failed this first meeting, and I'm gonna have you change your data set, okay? But I have to do this because the very first time I did final projects, I didn't meet with the groups, and then they turned in their final things, and I didn't know how to grade their thing because the data set that they picked was just terrible and really hindered their project. It was a little bit ugly. So anyway, we're gonna get together with your group. If all of you can't make it, you know, maybe you'll lose a couple points, but try to get it so where everybody can meet, okay? And then it'll be kind of just first come, first serve on this thing, right? And then so most of the things, so it'll be 10:10 to 10:30, 10:30 to 10:50. These are 20 minutes each. 10:50 to 11:10, 11:10 to 11:30, 11:30 to 11:50. Okay. Then I take a break for lunch, and I teach from 1 to 2. And then I'll have meetings from 2:10 to 2:30 and 2:30 to 2:50, and that will happen right here in the this courtyard right here, right? So right next to Dodd Hall, right next to the law school, there's the Shapiro courtyard, and we'll have there. And then the other meetings, basically after class, will be back at my office as well. So anyway, we'll have a meeting. I will post a grading rubric for these project proposal meetings, and then also post a grade rubric for the final project, okay? And it will be detailed, and you can ask questions about that. Okay. Are there any questions about how this thing? Basically, just put in your group name, okay? Group name, what data you think you're gonna do. You can leave that blank for now, and then put in your project members. So you know, you guys should have group back off this time as ours. Okay, all right. So some people are already putting their things in, okay? But anyway, do that. Okay, let's talk about the final project and what I want you guys to start thinking about. Okay, so of relevance right now will be how to select your data. That's going to be the first thing you do, and the deadline for selecting your data is going to be whenever you scheduled the meeting. So if you scheduled it on Monday, you need to have your data selected by Monday, okay? And if you schedule it on Friday, you have a few extra days, and you just need to have your data selected by Friday, okay? Okay, so the final project is worth 30% of your final course grade, I think. That's correct, right? I just want to make sure I'm not lying or being mistaken. I would never intentionally lie to you guys, okay? But let's see. Final project, yes, 30%, okay? And I plan on grading it out of 300 points, and this is kind of the point breakdown. So your project proposal of the data, that'll be about 40 points, so a little over 10% of your final project grade, and then you'll have a technical report, and then kind of a presentation. And I'll have a kind of a rubric for each of these things. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about this project proposal meeting, and then the grade rubric will come out, and you should read that. Okay, so it says the project proposal meeting will take place during 6th week, and the meeting will be 20 minutes long. And the purpose of the meeting is to establish that the data to be analyzed is appropriate and that the scope of the project is also appropriate. Okay. You're allowed to use any data you can find or obtain, all right? If you have connections and you can obtain a data set, that's fine, all right? Minimum number of observations for your data set is going to be 40, all right? So I don't want a tiny data set where you only have like 15, 20 observations, okay? So the minimum size will be 40. Ideal number is probably a couple hundred to a couple thousand, okay? So anything between like, 250 to 3,000 or something, that's probably your ideal data set. You're allowed to work with much larger data sets if you want, right? Like if you want to use like the Uber data and it has like hundreds of thousands of records, you can do that, all right? There's no, but there's no bonus for doing anything that big, all right? And working with a giant data set is probably just going to make your life harder, okay? And I'm totally fine if you want to like take the Uber data set with like hundreds of thousands of rows and you just say, I'm going to just subset it to, these 10,000 rows or something like that, okay? Totally fine as well, all right? But you'll explain all of that in your data meeting with me, right? In your final project or whatever, okay, you've got to link at least to the data somewhere in the report, and the data needs to be uploaded to the repository if you can't link it, okay? This is important, okay? The data that you pick, someone's got to be knowledgeable about it or highly interested in it, okay? So if you're going to deal with Uber data, at least some people need to be knowledgeable, either firsthand experience like writing Uber and understanding all of these things. Probably everybody has written. It's better if somebody has driven for Uber or at least done that, so understand how that kind of works. Depending, I don't know which neighborhoods they release, but you should hopefully be familiar with that. So one example. So there's like a housing data set in like Seattle, okay? Seattle housing data set. And it's a popular data set. But in general, I don't think any of you have gone shopping for a house, right? Okay. Maybe your family has gone shopping for a house very recently and they involved you in the process, so you're at least familiar with that. But I don't know if any of you are familiar with the neighborhoods in Seattle, okay? Which puts you at a significant disadvantage, right? So for example, in Los Angeles, like we're familiar with some of these neighborhoods, right? Like if you know that a home is in Beverly Hills, you know it's going to be an expensive home, right? If it's in, or if you know that the home is in Westwood, okay, you know either it's going to be expensive or it's going to be filled with college students or something like that, right? And there's a familiarity with, at least some of the neighborhoods in Los Angeles, and you'll know like which areas are like Koreatown and which areas are by the airport and things like that, and you've got a sense, right? As far as Seattle goes, can any of you name a single neighborhood in Seattle? Okay, and I'm not going to say that disqualifies you. Like if you really want to use the Seattle housing data set, that's fine, but it's going to be putting you at a disadvantage, and I might deduct just a couple of points, okay? It's not going to be the end all, and I'll probably still allow you to do it, but you might lose a couple points if nobody is knowledgeable about neighborhoods in Seattle. And that's fine, right? It's just kind of, you'll lose a couple of points, but you can still use it if you want, right? And I think I gave this example too, like if you want to do like the wine data set, like somebody should be knowledgeable about wine, okay? And if no one drinks wine, or if like you just became legal to drink and you don't know anything about wine, don't use that data set, okay? Like it's not interesting that you can tell me the difference between red wine and white wine. I can tell you the difference. I can just look at it and say that's red wine and that's white wine, okay? It's like, this is not an interesting, project, right? If you can distinguish between subtleties of certain things, yeah, that could be interesting, but you probably need to be knowledgeable, right? Okay? The data has to be real, okay? Not an artificial data set, okay? So I think some, I don't know what people do, right? They go to Kaggle and they go to data sets, okay? Which is a great place to start, but look into the data, all right? And I'm telling you all of this now because you need to have your data selected by 6th week, and it's probably not something yet you just want to spend like 20 minutes doing, okay? So I think there's like kind of education data with like, I don't know. I don't know. Somebody was looking at some kind of education data set, and it turned out to be just simulated data, okay? That's a problem, all right? I don't want you guys using simulated data, okay? Simulated data is going to be way too clean. It's not going to be interesting, okay? When you look at the data, you should be able to tell me about how the data was obtained, okay? Did somebody go out and record it? Were these values self-reported? You know, did they scrape them from the internet? Okay, maybe you can't answer all of these questions, all right? Maybe you can answer some, a lot of them, but you know, you'll be graded on this, right? And so, you know, unless you obtain the data yourself, you might not be able to answer all of these questions, okay? And that's fine, but I'm going to be keeping this in mind when you talk to me about your data, right? And then you need to be able to explain basically all the columns that are in the data that you plan on using, all right? And if you're not able to explain what the values mean in a particular column, I'm not going to let you use that column in your analysis, okay? So for example, this is a popular data set, or it's not going to be after I tell you this, okay? But the last time, so this was an issue. Every time I teach this class and we do this project, like a group does something and then I have to say, okay, don't do this. And then I have to revise my rules, okay? So here's something, graduate admission, and it looks like, oh, okay, here's good, something good, right? And you look at the data, and there's, okay, it's not showing up here yet, okay? And, you know, at first glance, it seems reasonable. It says, the data contains several parameters which are considered important during the application for master's programs, GRE scores, TOEFL scores, university rating, statement of purpose, and a letter of recommendation strength, undergraduate GPA, research experience, and chance of admit, right? And people are trying to predict the chance of admission. Okay. And then, let me see if I can. Okay, so here's what the data looks like, all right? And I think this is like the average kind of GRE for that school of people being admitted and stuff, or yeah, or I'm not even sure. Is this an individual student? Okay. So this is all it says. This is kind of the description. And so first of all, I'm not even 100% sure. I think this is an individual and they're applying to schools or something, okay? And they are applying to, so there's just not a whole lot of information, right? So university rating 1, is that a good school or is that a bad school? Okay, statement of purpose, I don't know how they're getting these numbers, right? 4.5, who's evaluating this, right? And then we're trying to predict chance of admit. Okay. All right, and so like at a high level view, we're like, okay, this student has a 92% chance of getting admitted, right? Their letter of recommendations were strong. Their statement of purpose was strong. They're applying to a level 4 university, which I'm assuming is better than a level 3. Their GRE is very high. Their TOEFL score is very high or something, okay? But where did this number come from? (0.92). Who came up with this number? Like, am I to believe that this student applied to 100 schools and got admitted to 92 of them? Where is this number coming from? And so anyway, basically, some student groups have proposed using this data set. But then when I ask these questions, like, how do we know this number is 0.92 and how do we know that this number is 0.76? They were not able to tell me. They were not able to tell me how this chance of admit was calculated, right? Because if it was like raw data, it would either be they got admitted or they didn't get admitted, right? It would be admitted yes or no, okay? But somehow they got this. So to me, this leads me to believe that this is just estimated or calculated through some, like, they just plugged in a bunch of numbers and they just made up this number here, right? And so now, I guess the problem, if you were to use this, the problem is to just be like backwards engineering this, right? And here the GPA is measured on a 10-point scale, which I don't quite know how that works, right? We're used to seeing GPAs on a 4-point scale. So I'm assuming 9.65 is really good. And I don't know, okay? Basically, there's just too many questions with this data set, okay? It says graduate admissions from an Indian perspective, so I guess maybe GPAs in India are on a 10-point scale. I'm not sure. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the education system in India. That would be helpful. And then there's some discussion on this, but basically nobody I've talked to is able to explain what those columns mean. Okay. So don't use that data set, right? There's too many questions. So I want you to go through and pick a data set and look at it and investigate where these columns are coming from, what the values in those columns mean, okay? If you're gonna do, like, for example, if you're gonna do a housing data set and they talk about square footage, okay? You should know about how big a house should be, right? Like, what do you think average size of a suburban home is? Okay. And you should have a sense of this either, if not prior to the data, from after looking at it, like, get a good sense, right? So average size of a suburban home, probably somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 square feet, something around there, right? And I don't know how big your apartments are. Your apartments are probably, if you have like a 2-bedroom apartment, it's probably 900 to 1,000 square feet, something around there. And as you add more bedrooms, it gets a little bit bigger and stuff like that. And so you should have a sense of like what values are big. If you see a house that's 5,000 square feet, you're gonna know, wow, that's a really big house, okay? And somebody should have some kind of sense here, right? Right, some group in the past, they wanted to do the Pokemon data, which was fine because they played a lot of Pokemon and they knew, like, okay, this thing has a hit point rating of whatever, and that's really high, and this is low or whatever. I don't know, okay? Somebody should be knowledgeable. Okay. So anyway, I wanted to just kind of talk about that as far as the selection of data goes. I'll put a grading rubric for the selection of data up pretty soon, and it will kind of show how these things are. I guess as the weeks go on, we'll talk about the actual written report and what's expected for the presentation as well. But I want you guys to start thinking about your data, you know, have some kind of chat thing going on. In CampusWire, you are able to create groups, so you can create your own group with your team members, and or I don't know, you use whatever app you want to use, right? Like if you guys are all into GroupMe or Facebook Messenger or something, that's fine. But I know on CampusWire you are able to create you are able to create your own groups as well. Okay, so that's fine. Okay, are there any questions on stuff like that? Nothing? Okay. All right. Well, in that case, give me a second here.